Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to be talking about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Now, I made a video about her case, her mother, all of that. I don't know, it was years ago at this point. I will link it down below, so if you're not in the loop or up to date with what all happened, you know, why Gypsy Rose was in prison and all of that, that will be in that video. Today is really just an update, which I feel like is necessary considering I did cover her case in that one more comprehensive video. I wanted to talk about what's going on now. So, it seems like People magazine got an exclusive, which is the only, and let me underline, the only reason that I'm referring to that particular magazine. I think you guys know how I feel about it. We know where Cosmopolitan stands. People is off screen down here, okay? So, Gypsy Rose was actually freed this morning. I believe it's already this morning in the States. Yes. So, she was freed, but what was interesting was what she said about her quote-unquote crime and her mother, and we're also going to be discussing what people on social media have been saying because there was a lot. Gypsy Rose Blanchard released from 10-year prison sentence early after mother's murder. I'm ready. Gypsy Rose Blanchard was granted parole in September after serving nearly 7 years for her role in the murder of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. I'm ready for freedom, Gypsy tells People in an exclusive interview conducted just before her early release. I'm ready to expand, and I think that goes for every facet of my life. Ozarks First and the Springfield News Leader previously reported in September that the Missouri Department of Corrections said Gypsy, 32, was granted parole and was set to be released in December. This is a little bit of a summary. Gypsy was sentenced to 10 years in prison in July 2016 after pleading guilty to murder for her role in the fatal stabbing of her mother, Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard. By the time Gypsy was released, she served 85% of her sentence, as her time spent in the Greene County Jail before the Missouri Department of Corrections contributed to her overall sentence. After Dee Dee Blanchard was found dead in June 2015, Gypsy, who was 23 at the time, and her boyfriend at the time, Nick Gojon, were both charged with murder. Now, no one will ever hear me say I'm proud of what I did or I'm glad that she's dead, Gypsy tells People. I'm not proud of what I did. I regret it every single day. Following their arrest, it was revealed that Dee Dee had fabricated all of her daughter's medical issues and that Gypsy was a victim of Munchausen by proxy syndrome, a rare form of abuse in which a guardian exaggerates or induces illness in a child for attention and sympathy. Dee Dee had convinced everyone in their lives that she was a terminally ill teenager with the mind of a 7-year-old who suffered from muscular dystrophy, leukemia, and other ailments. I would voice concerns being like, I really don't feel like I need this, and she would get really upset with me and start manipulating me, says Gypsy. Gypsy had claimed that her mother wouldn't allow her to speak during doctor's visits and told her that if she ever tried to escape, police wouldn't believe her story. So this is a little bit of a summary, I mean, along with some new information based on the interview, obviously. I'm gonna bring in the social media discourse here for a second because it's been interesting, because on Twitter, I did not search this whatsoever. This was coming up on my timeline completely randomly. In fact, I forgot that she was due to be released. So a lot of people were saying how she shouldn't have been in prison in the first place. And a lot of people, like, obviously there are memes out there. At this point, I think we're all well aware that memes will come out of anything. And in fact, the first thing that comes to mind, I know it's not exactly a meme, but remember when there was that one blue-eyed model, like really intense blue eyes, and then it turns out that he was actually in jail, but people were still fawning over him because he was a model and attractive and he actually got signed by a label. That's not exactly a meme, but it does tell you something about the power of social media to change narratives. Now, here we're not talking about changing narratives, we're just talking about the fact that it is a very dark story, right? But there are still memes being made of it, but such is the internet. Social media, though, in terms of more serious discourse about this, a lot of people have been saying that they didn't really think that Gypsy Rose should have been in prison in the first place. Honestly, I tend to, generally speaking, agree with that. Now, do I support murder? No. That being said, I think this is a lot more complicated than just like, oh yeah, this was like a cold-blooded killing. I think this was a very desperate case and someone was attempting to free themselves from a situation in which they felt trapped and abused. Just so it's not that simple. People on social media were voicing their support for her getting out. But again, to return to the whole meme thing, a lot of people were saying how like she's gonna sign contracts with Fashion Nova and she's going to be offered all these opportunities. And honestly, as much as it's kind of funny to imagine Gypsy Rose, like, with that dark history, being like, hey, get 30% off Fashion Nova with my code. It's kind of funny to imagine, but realistically, I do think that there are going to be some very big opportunities given to her, not just to tell her story and what happened to her, but just because there was so much discourse around her name, especially when the shows came out about her. I can't remember what they're called now, but there were multiple shows that I remember watching. There's a lot of hype around her name, so that alone will get brands interested. Whether they're genuine or not is a different story. But it will be interesting to see how this progresses, because even if we count Casey Anthony, now Casey Anthony is a completely different story. I'm just talking about people coming out of prison right now. I'm not comparing her to Casey Anthony, but Casey Anthony, whether you believe she's guilty or not, got quite a few opportunities, including spreads on, what was it, Penthouse? It wasn't Playboy, it might have been Penthouse. I can't remember. But a lot of shit happened once she was free to roam again. So I'm wondering which route Gypsy Rose is going to take there. Regardless, back to the actual article at hand. I was very sheltered, explains Gypsy, who was never enrolled in school and was largely kept from having a relationship with her father, Rod, stepmother Christy, and her half-siblings. I was limited in what I could watch and the exposure I had to other kids. What I knew of the outside world was only in Disney movies, and those don't talk about warning signs of bad parents. In November 2017, Gypsy told Dr. Phil McGraw that she didn't believe she deserved as many years as she got. I believe firmly that no matter what, murder is not okay, she said at the time. I do believe that I do deserve to spend some time in prison for that crime, but I also understand why it happened, and I don't believe that I'm in the right place to get the help that I need. Today, she's much more reflective. She didn't deserve that, she says, of her mother's killing. She was a sick woman, and unfortunately, I wasn't educated enough to see that. She deserved to be where I am, sitting in prison doing time for criminal behavior. Gypsy's boyfriend, Go John 32, was sentenced to life in prison without parole in 2019 following his trial conviction for first-degree murder. Go John met Gypsy online and traveled from Wisconsin to see her in Missouri. According to Gypsy's testimony in court, she had talked him into it. That's another regret she has. If I had another chance to redo everything, I don't know if I would go back to when I was a child and tell my aunts and uncles that I'm not sick and mommy makes me sick, says Gypsy now. Or if I would travel back to just the point of that conversation with Nick and tell him, you know what, I'm going to tell the police everything. I kind of struggle with that. Now, this is interesting because it seems like there is a level of blame that she's taking, because she did say that she wasn't educated enough to understand that her mom had like a severe issue, which I think is in its own way fair, in the sense of when you're dealing with someone, it's very hard sometimes to tell if what they have is an actual illness, like some kind of mental illness, or if it's a behavioral issue, or what, you know, like the category it kind of fits into, right? Because you don't want to excuse every type of bad behavior saying, oh, it's obviously related to mental illness, because that's just not the case. Some people are just terrible fucking human beings. But I feel like it's very telling that she does take some of the blame, saying, in terms of her mom's behavior, saying she wasn't educated enough to see it. It's like, bro, no one's educated enough to see that, and you shouldn't have to be as your parent's child. You shouldn't be educated to know that what they're doing to you is fucked. Like, that's not part of a child's responsibility. So, you know, everything else obviously is up to her to, you know, feel guilty about it or whatever, but I really don't think anyone is expected to know that that's not okay behavior, especially if you're so isolated. You don't know what normal, quote unquote, is. I do find it interesting that she does still think she deserved some time in prison, but considering this part of being uneducated and feeling like she should have just gone to the cops, it adds up that she would feel guilty for her crime and that she needed time in jail. Hopefully the support she gets, memes aside, will also help. I mean, I don't think anything can make your own inner guilt really go away. Not people on the outside, maybe therapy, but aside from that, I don't really think any type of support, unfortunately, really does that. That has to be your own work. I guess we'll see if she ever does another interview updating the public. About Gojon, I honestly had forgotten that he'd gotten life in prison. I thought he'd gotten, obviously, an extensive sentence, but I didn't remember that it was effectively life in prison. A lot of people, I remember, were also commenting on that. And I don't really want to make any statements about this because I don't have the full information, but people on social media were also saying that seeing his mental state, it wasn't quote unquote fair to give him that amount of time because they didn't deem him as well enough to make choices, like distinct choices, as opposed to making choices out of impulse or due to mental issues. Gypsy and Gojon have since separated, and Gypsy's now married to Ryan Anderson, a Louisiana teacher she wed behind bars last year. She tells people we're in love. She adds, when I'm at home with my family, with my husband's arms around me and I'm surrounded by my loved ones, that is when I will be happy. Now, as she prepares to tell her own story in Lifetime's gripping new docuseries, The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, premiering January 5th, she's opening up about her shocking journey to help others. I want to make sure that people in abusive relationships do not resort to murder, she says. It may seem like every avenue is closed off, but there's always another way. Do anything, but don't take this course of action. Now that's interesting. I'm definitely going to end up watching it because I remember binge watching basically every series about all of this. And especially considering that she's involved in this, hopefully in terms of making, you know, like the production choices and everything, I would love to see what there is to say now that all these years have passed. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you think she deserved as much time as she got? Do you think Go-John deserved as much time as he got? And yeah, let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you to my patrons as always, and I'll catch you guys next time.